Hey everybody, my name is Matt Pierce. I'm the Learning and Video Ambassador for TechSmith Corporation. So glad that you could join us today. We've got people monitoring the chat, so we'd love to hear where you're coming from. If you're watching from someplace, you want to let us know, go ahead and put it in the chat. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and we are monitoring across all three, so let us know. As we get going today, one of the things we like to mention at the beginning of every show is just the TechSmith Academy is something that we love and are happy that we get to share with you all. It's free learning content. You can go out and learn about videos and script writing and storyboarding and all sorts of things. One of the things we're highlighting is our screen recording basics course. It's available in its entirety, or if you want to watch on YouTube, you can watch them. We're dropping episodes every week, but go check out the whole course. If you're new to screencasting, it'll take you start to finish through the entire process. I will note it is not about using Camtasia. It mentions Camtasia, but it's not the functions and features. So definitely check that out. Now, before we introduce our guests, I just want to say, we know there's a lot of crazy stuff going on today. There's fires and floods and hurricanes and all sorts of stuff. Wherever you are, we hope you're staying safe and taking care of yourself because it's 2020, folks. I mean, geez, oh, Pete's. Are we ever gonna get through this year? We hope so. Now, I want to introduce my guest. He's actually been a guest before. We're so grateful that he was willing to return. And I want to say that, sometimes you find people in the world that you just connect with and you just like to talk to. Tim Slade is one of those people. And I appreciate Tim not only because he's just easy to talk to, but he's always sharing information. He's always looking to help people in learning and design to get better at what they do. And so with that, I want to welcome Tim Slade to the Visual Lounge. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Matt, I have to ask, is Geez O Pete's like a regional Michigan expression there?
It's at least a Matt Pierceism, if
That
nothing
works.
else.
Yeah, I like it. I think I'll have to borrow Geez O Pete's.
Yeah, I don't know where I learned it, but I'm not much one for the cursing.
No,
So I
Geez O Pete's. It sounds like a frozen meal type of brand. Geez O Pete's, Salisbury steak and peas.
see, this is why I love having conversations because you'll call out my Midwesternness.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I spent some time in the Midwest. I know what bubblers are and all those things. Did you grow up in a time when they said time machines referencing ATMs? Did you know that?
No, I
In
have not.
Wisconsin, yeah, in Wisconsin they call them time machines. And I remember when I moved there from Phoenix, my coworkers were like, "Oh, I'm headed to the time machine," and I'm like, "Oh yeah," and it was the ATM. So
Okay. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, Wisconsin might be very different than Michigan. We've got our own little phrases and sayings. Oh, can I just scooch right through here? It's something
yeah,
that we say a lot. A couple few.
couple
So
few.
a couple few.
Okay, I like
So,
that.
so Tim, we're glad you're here, despite our Midwesternness today. One of the things we're going to be talking about is your new as in second edition of your book.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, well, it went live on Amazon last Tuesday. So yeah, it's been, gosh, it was like, for me, it's been almost 9 months in the making. So, between me and you and everyone else, like I'm so done with the second edition of my book, but for everyone else, it's brand new. Yeah, it just came out on Amazon last week. So I'm super happy about that.
Yeah, and congratulations on that. I mean, what an undertaking. I mean, obviously you spent 9 months on the revamp, all the time, the initial writing, and just so
Yeah.
everybody knows that's watching, we're giving away got to get my hands in the right spot, 3 copies today, and we're going to be talking about
Yes.
that, how you can get access to that, because we want to make sure we give folks at home that are watching a chance to win it. I will say for the podcast, if you're listening later to this is unfortunately going to be a live only thing that we're giving away. So if you're listening later, we're sorry, but go check out Tim's book. Where can we find it? So if people are looking, they're anxious right now
Yeah.
to go look for it.
If you go on Amazon and search e-learning and scroll through it, it's a big blue square book, has my name on it. You'll find it. So,
Awesome. Yeah, just look for
yeah.
Tim Slade everywhere.
Yeah.
So for those who are watching, if you're watching, let's just say we Tim and I talked about this. If you want to get access to a copy of the book, what we're going to need you to do is we want you to tell us how you got introduced to instructional design, e-learning, creating training content. Just tell us a couple words about that. By the end of the episode, what we'll do is we'll go through and pick a few of those, and then you'll contact me directly, and we'll get you set up with shipping and stuff like that, so that we can get you your copy of the books. Sound good, everybody? Let us know if you have any questions.
Perfect.
So Tim, last time you were on, we talked about your whole backstory. We talked about how you got involved. I don't want to talk about that. They can go watch that. We know you were in loss prevention, and like a lot of people, made the random jump into the world of learning development because most people don't go through the same process.
Yeah.
However, I was the weird one that I went through school. I didn't have a job, like a full-time job before I got into e-learning. And I was thinking about this. And as a lot of people go through that process of making that, they're doing something, they find that they're good at teaching or they like doing it, and they end up doing e-learning or training or design for instructional design. What steps should someone take along that journey to feel confident in being able to do the e-learning job? Because I know I actually applied for a job when I was in an internship. I was learning about instructional design. I applied for an internship or a job with the federal courts of all places to do training stuff. And I didn't feel I was I don't know enough. I can't do this job. I turned down an interview and everything because I was so nervous about feeling capable. So what should someone know, or what steps should they take to feel comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, as I think sometimes it's easy for me to forget some of the challenges I faced when I started, but I was reminded actually this morning, I got an email from a woman who's attending a storyline class that I'm teaching, an articulate storyline class. And one of the things she was struggling with is, we're learning how to use storyline to build e-learning. And this is true whether you're using Camtasia to create video or storyline to do e-learning. There's a difference between the technical skills that go into the construction and the design and development of an e-learning course, and then there's the technique. And so one of the things she was struggling with is, she understood how to create an e-learning course, the technical aspect of it, because that's what we've been teaching in this class that I'm teaching. But she was like, I'm trying to do this myself, and I have all of this content, and I have stakeholders, and I just don't know how that translates into an e-learning course. She's trying to translate this instructor-led workshop into e-learning. And so, the thing, I always equate it to building a house. If you wanted to go build your own house, looking at the end result seems overwhelming. Where do you even begin? And really it's about, starting with the blueprint and then going from a blueprint to a 3D mockup, and then from a 3D mockup to, okay, I need this lumber, and it's iterating your way there. And so one of the things that, when I started, I really struggled with figuring out where to begin. And so my biggest tip for people is, don't worry about the technology of how you're going to develop it. Don't worry about how it's going to look. Just focus in on your content. And even if you're just writing on a piece of paper, or you're sketching out slides, or you're working in PowerPoint, or whatever tool you're using, just start simple and iterate on that from there. And, I know one of the things we'll talk about is how do you design e-learning that actually gets results. And it always comes back to just start with the good content, design good content, even if you're just doing it on scraps of paper, and slowly iterate to the completed course. Don't worry too much about what the end result will look like, because then you'll just overwhelm yourself.
Yeah, so that leads to a question, because I can imagine okay, focus on my content, but I think the question becomes for a lot of people, how do I know that this is going to be good at helping someone to learn? I think more than ever before, Tim, and see if you agree with me, that everyone is a teacher nowadays. People go on YouTube and they teach, and they have no credentials, they have no background, they have no formal stuff, and that's fine. But how do you know that, as someone who's being tasked by maybe a company, or who knows all the different ways that you might be tasked to create some learning content, how do you know if it's really effective learning content? And I'm not talking about metrics and stuff like that, but are there principles or ideas here that you can say, here, look for this, look for that?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to get, if I'll be really simple at first with what I'm about to say, and then I'll get more practical. So one of the things I did when I was new to e-learning, not knowing, I didn't know what instructional design was when I got into
Hmm.
e-learning. In fact, I actually thought instructional design was totally separate than being an e-learning developer. Obviously that's not the case. Instructional design is a function of my role, right? And so one of the things I think the thing that makes a good educator or a teacher, regardless of how you're teaching or what you're teaching, is the ability to empathize with somebody who is brand new at something. So if I'm being really really simple here, and it maybe sounds philosophical, but before I knew what instructional design was, I at the very minimum knew how to put myself in the shoes of somebody who might be having to learn the content, the skills, the behaviors of what I was trying to teach. And I still use that today. Like I empathize with, okay, well, if I didn't know this, what would I need to know and what would I need to do? And I think oftentimes, we have stakeholders and subject matter experts. They really struggle with being able to empathize with people who don't know anything about what they're talking about. And that's frankly, it's what makes them experts. By the time you become an expert in something, it is hard to empathize with somebody who doesn't know anything about what you're talking about. And so I think the special thing for us is to empathize with our learners and understand what are the things they're going to know. And then from, being more practical and more more focused on the technique of instructional design, the biggest thing I think is focusing less on what people need to know and more on what people need to do. At the end of the day, our learning, regardless of what you're creating, if it's a job aid, a video, or a full-fledged e-learning course or a workshop, is really just looking at the behaviors and tasks that you want people to do on the job. And if you focus on that and you focus your conversations with your stakeholders and subject matter experts on doing rather than knowing, then it just keeps pointing you in the right direction of what content you choose to include or exclude, what sort of activities you build, whether they're focused on performance or just knowledge retention. So if you can empathize with your learner and focus on doing, at the very minimum, like you're going to be headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's trying to change cameras here. Trying
That's
to
okay.
try, it's like managing a circus here. Three rings I've got going on. No, but I love that, right? Because I think, I mean, there's lots of thoughts about these assessment tests out there that you can take about yourself. And I know
Mm,
at work we just did one. It's strength finders, right? Like what are
sure.
your strengths? And it's interesting to see the number of people that in like some of my groups that are kind of natural teachers. Maybe they're not instructional
Hmm.
designers all, but like how many of us have that high on empathy, right? Like
Yeah.
being empathetic. So I love that idea because I feel like at the heart of good learning is understanding that someone else doesn't know what you know, and if you're just trying to, if you can get them to that point, it makes a lot of sense. Now, what role do you think? Because there's lots of theory, there's lots of science out there about these things. What role do you think that all plays? And especially thinking through the lens of a new person, like how much should they spend? You spend time going to read articles and get
Yeah.
set up on like trying to understand the scientific side of learning design.
Yeah, it's hard because for not for all people, but for a lot of people, at least people like me, theory's not fun. It's not fun to read about theory, and it's more fun to learn about practical things that you can implement right now. And so, for at least for me, for a long time, I don't actively, consciously or subconsciously, I avoided learning about the theory. And then, as I got deeper in my career, of course, it's something that I started to explore. And so, if somebody's new to e-learning or new to instructional design, again, thinking at the minimum that you can do, the minimum thing would be to learn about adult learning theory and the differences between pedagogy and andragogy. And the reason why it's so important is for folks out there like me who didn't have a formal background in education or adult learning, when you get put in a position where you have to create training content or a learning experience for someone else, what we oftentimes do, or what I've found, is we revert back to what we know.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a background in adult learning theory, the thing that we do know is we know, we all had an experience going to school from the age of 5 all the way up till 18 and then beyond that. And so we create learning experiences that mimic that type of learning experience, which is geared towards children. And so it's very facilitator driven. It's just more focused on delivering knowledge versus creating performance. And so the big shift for me was when I realized and when I learned about, Malcolm Knowles' adult learning theory and the principles of adult learning, and focusing on creating learning content that helped my adult learners solve real world problems rather than just trying to transfer knowledge and information, and realizing that adults are motivated differently than children when it comes to learning, and the way we approach creating performance-based learning is totally different than the way you might do it for children. And so I think you're right, there's just countless theories you can go out there and explore, and it's easy to become overwhelmed with it. But just understanding the differences between andragogy and pedagogy, which sound like, really overwhelming terms, but it's just really a difference between adults and children in the terms of learning. If you can just do that, then again, it'll at least change your thinking.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, right? And that's the interesting thing. There's so many things out there, and there's so many theories, and they are getting updated. Um, I, I I actually feel like I'm somewhat at a disadvantage that when I did my master's degree and I learned all
Mm-hmm.
about theory, we talked about Bloom's, we talked about Gagne, we talked about we had a book that was all about learning theories, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that's great. But as someone I wasn't becoming a PhD, I wasn't becoming someone to increase the body of knowledge. It was really about I was going to become a practitioner, and I feel like I missed the opportunity to understand some of those things better because I didn't practice first. Wasn't
Mm-hmm.
involved. I didn't my workplace experience. I had been a teacher for a nonprofit organization preparing young men and women to go serve missions for a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
Like I taught them for 3 weeks at a time, right? Like that
Yeah.
wasn't much of I mean, yeah, it was teaching experience, but I didn't have that corporate experience. I wish now that
Yeah.
I look back, I'm like, I can see like, oh, I wish I understood these theories better from a very much like, what does it mean to apply principles of instruction and, Gagne. Now I find myself reading lots of papers because I'm like, well, what does the literature actually say about video? Like
Well,
what really is work?
I think what's interesting about that, and I've seen this too with a lot of folks who they go to college with learning about instructional technology or instructional design or adult learning theory. They go get a master's degree or even a PhD, and then they get thrown into the corporate world and they get smacked in the face because they realize, oh gosh, I know all the theory, but I wasn't able to put it into actual practice during those 4 or 8 years you spent in college. And so it's interesting because when I fell into the corporate world of learning and development, even though I didn't know the theory, I was constantly pressured for an ROI on my learning content. And so it was through that experience for me that forced me to go learn about, okay, well, if I need to get an ROI, what are the things I need to do that's going to help people do the things that's going to get the ROI? And so it's kind of that's how I fell upon the theory, was being pressured for, at the end of the day, delivering a result to the business. And so it's not, there's no right or wrong way to get into our industry, or what if you fell into it by accident like me, or like you went through it intentionally. It's just realizing that there's experiences or knowledge that you're going to have to go obtain one way or another. College is not going to give you everything, and learning about it, being thrown in the deep end of the pool like I was, is not going to give you everything either.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question here. I want to address because I think
Sure.
it's an important question. We want to talk about more about the book, and everybody, just so you know, again, if you want a chance to win Tim's book, go ahead and tell us in the chat. How'd you get into this? How did you get involved in
Yep.
instructional design? Or even if you're not there yet, what are you hoping to do? And actually, so this is relevant.
Hmm.
Kathy, hi. I actually remember Kathy. She came to some of our screencast camps. She says, thanks to COVID, I had to change industries. Now I'm creating 5 to 7 episodes each week on crafting instead of one customer service video a month. Tim, what's the biggest change from the first and second edition of your book? So,
Oh gosh.
obviously, the world changes. I'm sure I don't even know when the first book was launched, but
Sure.
things the I guess the field, if we can call it that, moves forward. So are there bigger changes or things that you updated between one and
Yeah.
two?
So I guess let me. The first book came out, I think, in 2017. I had joined GoDaddy at the time. I was their director of instructional design, and when I joined GoDaddy, I was tasked with taking four people who knew nothing about instructional design or e-learning and turn them into e-learning designers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was through that experience, I can literally remember where I was sitting in my office as I was putting together all this content for them, and I looked at the content and I was like, oh, I have a book here. And so then I wrote a book through that experience teaching these people how to become e-learning designers. And it was because I was teaching my team at the time how to become e-learning designers, all of my content was super practical about managing stakeholders and managing projects and creating storyboards and prototypes. And then after I left GoDaddy and started my own business at the beginning of 2019, what I really wanted to do at the time was write a totally separate book on instructional design for e-learning, because that was really what was missing from the first book, is how do you create e-learning that actually delivers a result. It was really only focused on the practical ins and outs of managing the project. And I hem and hawed on it for the longest time. And then I realized that I couldn't talk about instructional design without talking about the project management. I couldn't talk about the project management without talking about the instructional design. And so that's when it dawned on me that I really needed a second edition of my book. So to answer Kathy's question, I literally rewrote probably every single page in the book and touched every single word and the design of it. So really what's new in the book is it's still the foundation of managing projects and managing stakeholders and writing storyboards, but it's been augmented with all the other things that go into making a really good e-learning course. So it's the how do people learn and how to do the needs analysis and how to create a blended learning solution. That's not just e-learning or ILT. You might create a blended solution. It's how to create interactivity that drives performance. And so it includes all of these instructional design things that take what I wrote in the first edition and just takes it one step further. And then beyond that, in total, I think it's about 3 times more content. It's printed in color now. It's just a total revamp. It is not the same book at all from the first edition. If I could call it a brand new book, I would. It's more different from the first book than it is the same.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's awesome. I mean, and it makes so much sense because it's been interesting to me as I've progressed in my career that instructional design has become more like build the design piece is
Mm-hmm.
like it's such a sliver. Like,
Yeah.
we're doing it for maybe this portion of it, but there's all these other things I have to be doing. And even and especially in technology. And I don't know if, others are experiencing this, but I feel like it's a lot of that connecting with the customer. It's connecting with the developers of the software. It's doing all these things. And only, out of let's say a 1 year cycle, it's like 6 weeks of development.
Sure. Yeah. And I think one of the common themes in my first book and even in the second edition is that good e-learning design is so much more than just instructional design. It's
Yeah.
everything from how you manage your stakeholders to how you create a storyboard to the visual design component. Like creating good content is super important, but it's really only a sliver of creating something that's actually going to be effective in the practical world.
Makes complete sense. And I'm just
Yeah.
chuckling because I'm trying to balance all the chat and stuff and read people's stories. And literally
Yeah.
at any given point, Tim, there are 4 of you on my screens.
Oh my gosh.
So it's a lot of fun I'm trying to go through, and some of the stories I'm seeing look just incredible. And I know I can't read them all right this second, but I will try to share these with Tim because I'm
Sure.
seeing some things that just, it's amazing to see all the different ways our colleagues get into the field, and it's just fascinating to me. So, Tim, one of
Yeah.
the things we want to talk about is, of course, this idea of delivering results from your e-learning, and it's obviously there's so much that goes into that. It depends, but I'm curious if you have thoughts about like how do you make sure that any given piece that you're doing is going to deliver those results, more so than what we've already talked about.
Yeah, I mean, so as I was going back to the book, as I was writing the book and trying to identify what are the key components to creating not just an e-learning course, but any learning deliverable that's going to deliver the desired results, the biggest thing that I came back to is it really starts at square one with how you respond to your stakeholders when they say we need training, because that's how it always starts. Is they have something that's not happening. They want people to be doing something that are not. They assume we need training, and how you respond in that very moment dictates whether or not any of that, the rest of that course, is going to be successful. And I cannot tell you how many times, and I'm sure other people can, this will resonate with them, and share in the chat and comment if this is your experience. But how many times do we start a project, you accept the request for training, you start designing something, and you get like 50-60% done through the project, and you have this like, oh crap moment when you realize, oh, this isn't going to fix it, because you become contextually aware of the issue and why they asked for it and what's really happening within the organization. And so the goal of creating learning, creating training that delivers results, is to shift that moment of realization that you have of what is the right answer to the beginning of the project before you invest any time creating content. And so you do that by doing a needs analysis and asking questions, and not just taking your stakeholders for at face value when they say we need training. It's asking, why do you think you need training, and identifying what's really happening with their audience, and trying to get a contextual awareness of what's happening, why it's happening, what needs to be done differently, so that you can make an informed decision of A, whether or not training is the answer, and B, whether or not e-learning is the answer. The sooner you can do that, the sooner you'll be much more successful in anything that you create.
Yeah, isn't that funny that the answer sometimes is to say no? Like it's to say like, no, 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 you don't need what you're asking for, what you really need. And I mean, the outcome's always going to be better if you can give someone what they really need versus what they really want, I suppose.
Yeah, well, so I have a big bolded section in my book of a big part of our job is talking our stakeholders out of training. Like we shouldn't, it shouldn't be default to create training. It should be default to find the issue and recommend a solution. And so I think one of the things a lot of folks struggle with, especially when they have training or instructional design in their job title, is realizing that part of our job is simply to recommend a performance solution, whether or not that requires training. And so sometimes it requires training, sometimes it requires a combination of things. And part of our job outside of creating training is making recommendations that maybe have nothing to do with training. And the challenge there, of course, is being persuasive and helping your stakeholders understand that you're not just saying no, you're saying, yes, training might fix it, but also your leadership style might fix it, or maybe a job aid might fix it, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, and that's when I was going through grad school, we call that the system, right? Look at the whole system. Look at all the parts and pieces. It might be that you need to tell somebody to stand differently, or they need, they're so worried about their benefits that, maybe there's things you can do to help them to get more focused.
Yep.
With that, Tim, I do want to do our first giveaway because
Oh yeah, let's do it.
away, and there's so many great stories again. So what we're going to do, if I'm going to say the name here, best we can go off as handles. We don't have your information. This is a public forum. I'm going to ask you to email me and give me, if you want to take a screenshot or something of your story or whatever. That way we can confirm it's, or your handle. I don't know, some kind of proof. Just don't everybody email me. The first person is Sandra Blondit. I hope I'm saying that right. And this is what Sandra had to say. She said, I teach teachers. Pretty common role, I think, out there doing design and training. She said, in January, we had a massive earthquake. Our school shut down. I was appointed one of the e-learning coaches for the entire region because I was the most, in quotes, techno-oriented trainer. That story doesn't feel so, minus the unfortunate part of the earthquake, it doesn't feel so unusual, right? Like, oh, you've got some tech skills. Make an online course.
That's hilarious. I like that story. When I joined GoDaddy, I was appointed to report to somebody who was an engineer, like an IT, and it was because the person who hired me at the time just did this kind of association of like e-learning, computers, IT, and so they put me with engineering, and so I was an e-learning designer, and then also I fixed the office copiers because people just assume, if you know e-learning, you can also do all these other things. That's a great story. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously difficult times. I mean, I think everyone's feeling difficult times, but it just doesn't feel so uncommon that you have some skills, transfer over, go do it. So
Yeah.
so Sandra, if you would email the visual lounge at techsmith.com. Got to get these emails out here. I'm trying to, again, I'm like looking around. I need about 12 more monitors, Tim, and some more things. So
So Sandra wins. So Sandra won.
She wins her first
Yay.
book, and we've got 2 more to give
Congrats,
away. So keep putting your
That's awesome.
stories in, and we'd love to hear from you guys. What is it that you want to know from Tim? Ask us questions. We're doing our best. There's a lot of chatter, which is good. We like it, but definitely give us a chance to make sure we're going through it all, and let us know what questions you have for us. So,
Yay, Sandra.
yes, and I think she was watching on YouTube. So
Cool.
if that helps. So Tim, we've talked a lot of about a variety of different things, and I'm thinking about we talk a lot about designing stuff, creating stuff, but the measurement part is one that I'd like to just jump into for a little bit, because I feel like that's the thing that often gets overlooked just because of time. And
Yeah.
it's hard, it's expensive, but what advice would you give, especially thinking about these folks who are trying to figure this out? What are some things they can do to really start measuring and looking at the effectiveness? I think sometimes you can just see like, yep, it worked, it didn't work, that's cool, but a lot of times it's more complicated than that. So do you have
Yeah.
advice for folks in that sense?
So I think a lot of times we, to your point, like we spend so much time working on getting the thing built and delivered that we think about measurement at the last moment, when in reality, I'll go back to my previous point, you have to think about how you're going to measure the thing again before you build it. And so if you're focusing on what people need to do, then you can identify, this is how we're going to measure the thing we're going to build, keeping your laser focused on the performance at the end of the day. And then when we talk about measurement, without going into the 4 levels of evaluation and whether you do surveys, quizzes, measure ROI or measure behavior, one of the things I think is a common theme, at least that I've seen, at least with like level 1, level 2 evaluations, when you're just doing a survey or like quiz questions, is it's so frequent that we do surveys or we add quiz questions, we collect all of this data and we do nothing with it. It just sits in the LMS. And so my general philosophy is, if you're not going to do anything with it, don't bother measuring. Like, you're not going to do anything with the data. Don't put a survey in because it's what you've always done or because it's obligatory, or don't do a quiz because quizzes don't engage learners, even though we think it's engaging. If you're not going to do anything with that data, don't do it. What we should be striving for is measuring, if we're talking about creating a learning that delivers results. No results are delivered by measuring whether or not somebody liked your course. And no, the results, business results, are going to be delivered because they answered, the correct answer on a multiple choice quiz. So, I don't put a lot of stock into level 1, level 2. It's cool, but it's easy, and we don't do a lot with it anyways. So what we should be doing is, when you deliver a course or you deliver learning, go and look at, did they accomplish the thing you were seeking to accomplish? And depending on what you're measuring and your audience and all of the different variables that go into it, no, it's not going to always be easy to measure that. It's not always going to be easy to get that data, or it's going to be time intensive to go observe those people. But at least make an attempt, at least try to identify what it is you're trying to change, and identify whether or not it's observable or measurable in the first place. And if it is, great, Yahtzee, go observe it and go measure it and see if what you're doing is actually effective.
Yeah, we had Don Mahoney on recently, and we talked a lot about this. Oftentimes people will design courses with the outcome intended of remembering how to do something. But that's not really, shouldn't be a course. That should be like a job aid, because like, if your expectations are going to remember it, either it's critical, like I'm a pilot, maybe there's some things I have to remember, or
Yep.
I'm just doing my job. Why? Like, I can look it up. Like, Google has maybe taught me that I need to just look it up, right?
The problem with that, and again, I say this in the book, knowledge and behavior aren't mutually exclusive. Just because people know more doesn't mean they're going to do more. Like, the example I give is, like, if I wanted to lose 30 pounds right now, I have all the knowledge to lose 30 pounds. I know I need to eat less and work out more. It's not an issue of knowledge. Maybe it's an issue of skill. Maybe I need to hire a trainer to help me work out more. Or maybe there's a motivational issue or an environmental issue because the West Coast is on fire and I can't go outside and hike because, there's so many issues there. It's not knowledge and behavior are not mutually exclusive. And so you're right. Like if you're going into building a course with the goal that they're going to remember something, yeah, maybe that's just a job aid, or maybe that's something they need to look up. Nobody needs to remember everything. Maybe they just need to find a way to reference it quickly.
Yeah, for sure. So another question. This one comes from Kyle Main. Sorry, Kyle. He said, "Where did Tim learn theory?" So obviously, you came through this path of you weren't a learning, graduate student. Yeah. So what was your path? And if you got references, that's cool. But like, how did you go about doing that? Was it just talking, going to conferences? Did you read a lot of articles? What did you do?
I learned by creating a lot of really crappy e-learning courses and learning through trial and error that, just putting a bunch of content and shoving it down my learners' throats wasn't going to be effective. And so the way I learned, and I do take pride in this. I take pride that I don't, I have a degree in criminal justice. I don't have any formal credentials in any of this stuff. And that's okay. I take pride in the fact that I was thrown in the deep end. And so what I do is I continually throw myself in the deep end of whatever I'm doing. And I'm going to get it wrong the first time. And through that failure, I'll learn, and then I'll start Googling. And so I learned theory through a lot of failure and a lot of Googling and attending conferences and just being really aware of what works and what doesn't work. That seemed to work for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but it's worked for me.
Yeah, that's what a great advice. And it's hard to remember because no one wants to fail. Like, the mantra at Facebook was fail fast. But let's be honest, failing sucks. It hurts. It's not fun, but it is really a great opportunity to learn. And if it's not, at least if it's not life or death circumstances, it's okay.
Sure. Yeah, it's totally fine. And I was talking with somebody about this the other day about, so many people go through life resenting that bad boss that they had, or that bad job that they got fired from unjustly, or that bad project. And in the moment, yeah, that sucks. But I think, if I'm going to get kind of woo-woo here for a moment, like, it sucks in the moment, but when you look back on it retrospectively, rather than having resentment over that failure or that bad boss, like, look at it and go, what can I gain from that experience? You can gain, I don't want to be that kind of boss again, or I don't want to have that kind of boss again. Or maybe I need to design differently, So I think embracing failure, even though it's not fun in the moment, embracing failure in the long run can really help you just overall improve who you are and what you do in whatever context, learning or just life in general.
Yeah. So let's take a quick break and give away a second book.
Woohoo!
And so this one is going to go to Orchid Stream. I hope I said that right. From YouTube, was watching on YouTube, and they say, "I train medics to use clinical systems. It took time, but I convinced management to invest in e-learning tools and training for me to develop online courses for busy staff to complete anytime, anywhere." So congratulations,
so cool.
Orchid Stream. And make sure you email the Visual Lounge at techsmith.com, and we'll get all your information. That way we can send you out that book, which actually leads to a question that I've seen it a couple times come through, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to put their question up on the screen because it's so much to sort through, but they're basically asking, Parisa Rifa asks or says, there are so many authoring tools. Which one is best? And, there are so many authoring tools, and there's so many different purposes. And I'm sure you can make lots of recommendations. So, feel free.
Yeah. Are there best tools out there? There's tools that I prefer. There's tools I might recommend. So, and I say this because I'm a true user. Like, I love Camtasia for my video editing because it's easy and it's what I love doing. But if somebody likes Final Cut Pro because it has more features or whatever, great, use Final Cut Pro. For e-learning, I prefer Storyline, but there's a lot of cool things Captivate can do. And so for me, so many people want to know, should I be using Rise for e-learning, or should I do Storyline, or should I do Captivate, or should whatever the case might be. And so for me, it's about doing what's fit for function for what you're trying to accomplish. And so, if you need to create an e-learning in a week, which is a very aggressive timeline, maybe it doesn't make sense to build something in Storyline. Maybe it makes sense to build something in Rise, right? Or if you need to produce a really professional looking video in 2 days and you're limited with your video skills, maybe you use Camtasia instead of trying to use Adobe Premiere Pro because the learning curve is different. So it's doing what's fit for function for your desired outcome and where you're at in that moment, and go from there. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, look, I'm super biased here, and I would
Of
say
course.
always use TechSmith tools. But I'm pragmatic in the sense that you're right. Like there is a tool for the job, and use the right tool when it's called for.
Yeah.
And I do think, I mean, just from an industry perspective, I think we like our tools a lot, and we
Yep.
like to we want things to be fancier than they are. I will say to Parisa's question that I really love PowerPoint. I'm not
Yes.
ashamed to say it. But it's about how you use PowerPoint. It's not that it's PowerPoint is so powerful, so many things, but of course you can make crappy stuff with it. Of course you can make terrible
Yeah.
stuff with it. But if you're smart about it, you can make some really cool stuff that isn't just a presentation either.
Yeah, so let me say about that. So I wrote a blog post a few years ago about different ways you can use PowerPoint for graphic design. And somebody sent me this really nasty Graham email about how I was encouraging people to create bad graphics by using PowerPoint because PowerPoint's not a graphic design tool. And there's this great quote. I think David Anderson from Articulate said it, or maybe he quoted somebody else. I don't know. But he said, blaming PowerPoint for bad graphic design is like blaming Microsoft Word for bad instructional design. It's not the tool you use, it's how you use it. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll quote Johnny Ive from Apple, or maybe it wasn't Johnny Ive, maybe it's where I heard it from, but there's a saying like the best camera is the one you have on you. And so if you
Mm-hmm.
have your iPhone camera, great. If all you know how to use is PowerPoint, great. You don't need to use Adobe Illustrator if you're really comfortable in PowerPoint. And so it's whatever you're comfortable with and whatever makes the most sense for the job you're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. And I would just piggyback on that and say that I think it's about knowing as much of what to put in as much of what to leave out. And the problem is too many people want everything, right?
Yeah.
We pile it on, let's do everything in there. And that just makes for crappy PowerPoint at that point.
Yep. Totally agreed.
Yeah, awesome. So this one's a little bit more complicated question, and we're going to come up on our final book giveaway in just a few more minutes. Yvonne Lee asks, is there a framework or such on how to go about creating an ROI calculator? What metrics are important to capture?
Gosh.
I mean, that feels like a really deep, heavy question. I don't know that I couldn't answer that question, but maybe Tim, do you any ideas or thoughts or where to point her to maybe?
I mean, here's what I'll say. In a previous job, we had created a dashboard, a metrics dashboard to track the performance of our learners in this call center environment. But the problem is that dashboard and the metrics we tracked and how we tracked them and compared it to the learning was so specific to that specific set of metrics and situation and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, maybe you can do that. I don't know, but I think it's going to be contextual to you, your organization, your learners, what you're measuring, what learning content you're creating, and how you're measuring it. So it's kind of the same. I give a similar response when people ask, and this has nothing to do with the question, but it'll make my point. When people say, well, is there a calculator that can calculate how long it'll take me to build an hour of learning content? And you can go Google that, and there's all sorts of articles about how long it takes to build an hour of e-learning content. And I think most of it is BS, if I'm being honest, because there's so many variables that go into how long it takes to develop an hour of e-learning content that nothing is going to be accurate. So, that's a technical question. I would refer you to Google.
which is a valid answer. I think
Yeah.
far too and that's I would say to anyone that's watching that is new, if you want to learn instructional design, start with Google, ask the questions, and be critical, right? Don't just take it at oh yes, this is all good stuff. May I also recommend that you go follow people like Tim on LinkedIn or on Twitter, because there are so many good people in our industry who are just willing to share. It's it's really impressive. I've learned a lot from many of the people that I follow because I think we're a very giving industry. We Like it's
Oh
not,
yeah.
it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So, another question for you. We got lots of good questions today.
Good.
Jen Whiting asks, what does the future of e-learning look like? What technologies, tools, approaches, etc. on the horizon? I don't know if you consider yourself a futurist or if you look at the future, if you're kind of set and doing your work, but have you seen anything that you think that's coming up that you're like, I'm going to watch that?
Yeah.
Anything?
Do I consider myself a futurist? No, because I find myself really skeptical about whatever is the current buzz technique in our industry. One of the things I've seen is each year, every time I go to a conference, there's going to be a highlight on one thing. So, like, I'll give you a great example. I remember when Apple Watches came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not joking. I went to a conference session where they were promoting how all e-learning courses will eventually be delivered on your wrist in a little micro e-learning course. And at the time, that seemed cool, but now looking on it, like, how ridiculous does that sound? You know what I mean? Nobody wants to take an e-learning course on their watch and hit the little next button, to continue. Nobody wants to do that. And so I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I'm a skeptical futurist, I guess, because these buzzwords come and go. So what do I think the future of e-learning is? I don't know what future technologies there will be. But I will say, I think, and I think we're already seeing this not only in Camtasia's products and Storyline's products or Articulate's products and any number of tools, but we are moving in a world where you can do just about anything you want to do without having to write code. Whether that's create a virtual reality simulation or augmented reality or an e-learning course or build a website or create a bot or build an app. Like there's just this huge shift of giving access to people to do things that they couldn't do before, and it's this double-edged sword with that, because while that's great for people like me, I have no interest in learning code, but I would love to learn how to build an app.
Yeah.
The problem is as it becomes more available, then you start having stakeholders and subject matter experts designing e-learning courses because, if it's as easy as PowerPoint, why don't they do it? Well, no, because they're not going to develop anything good. So that's kind of the double-edged sword of that. If anyone can build a website, well, we're going to have a lot of really bad-looking websites out there if it doesn't require a designer.
we saw that with GeoCities, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So a couple more questions, but one that I'm thinking about based on this, like what you said with the Apple Watch, right? So I don't know if you watched Apple's announcements this week, right? And they just released, of course, right? Like they released the whole Fitness Plus thing, which I think is really interesting because they've just released or are releasing, because it's not quite ready yet, the Fitness Plus, a bunch of instruction. They've just entered kind of the e-learning market for exercise. And to me, that's really fascinating. And it's not that the watch is where you're going to learn, but it's going to provide all this other data to interact. And to me, that's
going to augment your learning.
Yeah. That's super interesting.
Absolutely. I was really impressed a few years ago, and Apple hasn't had there wasn't a lot of attention on this, but Apple released a whole curriculum on their iPad teaching kids how to code, and they have apps, and they're essentially e-learning, like highly interactive e-learning courses for learning how to code. And so I think that's the other thing we're going to see is, and we are seeing it, not that we're going to see, but customer education is slowly starting to not butt heads, but like we're starting to intersect one another. And you're seeing this intersection between marketing, which tends to lead the customer education function, but also like that combined with the power of what real IT people can do is creating these really amazing experiences. And I think the pressure will be on us traditional L&D people to compete with that, because some VP at a company is going to see, well, look what the customer education team is doing. Why aren't we doing that for our employees? Let's make it just as good and just as give it just as much hype.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. And as someone who lives in that customer education world, the overlap, because customer education has been shunted around in a lot of organizations. Are they marketing? Are they, do they fit in IT? Are they part of sales? And so no one really they're still starting to land. So yeah, I think you're right though, because and I think it was Kathy Sierra, who was she was a writer for O'Reilly back in the mid 2000s. Great, had this great blog. She talked about instruction, things like that. She actually would talk about, like, what if our training looked like a marketing manual versus the black and white handbook that they would give you. That
Right.
just always resonated with me, that it was something that's super,
Well,
super valuable, that, like,
at the end of the at the end of the day, the function of marketing is to influence a potential customer's behavior. It's really about behavior change. The thing that marketing's done really good is they do it based on data and evidence. They go into it data first, evidence based first, and design first, and it works. Marketing, they know what works and they know exactly what levers to pull, and so really. Marketing is just a function of it's just a form of education. The end goal might be different, but they're really doing the same thing that we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I got two more questions I want to get through, and then we're going to do the book giveaway. We'll go through these kind of rapid fire. Fred Grover,
Sure.
Hey Fred, hope you're doing well. Where is the best place to learn how to set up an e-learning website for your courses? I know you've done some online course development, so what do you recommend?
Like a portfolio?
Yeah, well, a portfolio, or maybe you want to start, like, you want to do your own courses. Maybe you want to teach people how
okay.
to groom horses. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So if you're looking to create your own like online courses, maybe sell courses on what you're good at, I mean, that's an exploding market within itself. So I use Thinkific.com as an online course platform. I know a lot of people who use it and love it. Other people use Teachable. There's Kajabi. There's a lot of platforms out there for people who want to profit off of selling their knowledge. That's a huge floating thing that's happening right now. So if that's what you're asking, Teachable, Thinkific, Kajabi, those are great platforms. If you're looking to build a portfolio, that's a whole nother thing. I mean, you can Google websites you can do for free, and that's really easy, or WordPress, or any of those, Squarespace, those all work as well. But if you're looking to sell courses or build courses, I use Thinkific. I love that. Any of those are good.
Yeah, and we are seeing, Tim, just so you know, we're seeing a little bit of pixelation and getting a little choppy, but
okay.
hopefully we'll get through this.
Yeah.
The last question we've got time for, and I want to do the book giveaway, is Lisa Serino asks, what are your thoughts on virtual instructor-led versus e-learning? So, I mean, the biggest difference, I'm assuming, if we can define those, is instructional virtual led would be maybe like Zoom Live. E-learning would be on demand. It wouldn't be, be pre-programmed.
Yeah.
So any thoughts on which?
Yeah.
Either or?
So a lot of organizations, primarily because of COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of organizations have been forced into virtual training of some sort. And so what I've seen with a lot of clients is they go through this process of taking what they were doing in person and then converting it one-for-one into a VILT, a virtual instructor-led training. And then they realize, oh yeah, nobody wants to sit on Zoom for 8 hours in a day. So then they're going, well, what do we do with it? So then they start exploring e-learning or breaking it up. And so I think here's my general thought is, I don't think organizations should be trying to replicate the in-person experience one-for-one virtually. It's just not going to work because people get Zoom fatigue and they become Zoombies, and that's just fun. And so, I think here's what I'll recommend. If you're looking to convert something that was done in person into some virtual format, whether it's e-learning or VLT or job aid or videos, really strip it down and reimagine it and figure out what is it we want to accomplish and how does that translate into the virtual world, because you're not creating a one-for-one experience that's just not going to be effective.
Yeah, for sure. I know we had, and this is slightly different, Jay Bear, he's big in the marketing world, does lots of helping people promote, he does a lot of emceeing of big events and stuff like that as well. And he talked about the best virtual events that he's been part of since everything's happened with COVID is that he strongly recommends you pre-record your presenters and then have your presenters interact. So yes, it's still Zoom and it's still, they're still getting a presentation, but then it would be like us being much better at being able to chat during this, like with everybody that has these great comments, and how cool would that be? And so, yeah, I think I love that. Don't just don't try to recreate what worked face to face, change it for the right, for the medium. appreciate the circumstances, the differences, and the opportunities. So this is awesome.
Tons of ATD and some of our other events, they're doing that exact same thing. They're recording their speakers ahead of time. The speaker's still attending, but they're participating in chat while they're recording plays, and the attendees don't know the difference.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's do our last giveaway. This is the
Yay.
last opportunity for one person to win the book. And Tim, do you have a link? I mean, I think we have it. I think we've been putting it in the chat. Maybe we can get it put in the chat again for anyone that's interested in the book, wants to check it out. We'd encourage everyone, if you're not a winner, go on buy it. Tim,
yes,
it's good stuff. I have read the first edition. I started the second edition, then life got crazy busy and I didn't finish it. I'll get there.
That's okay.
But our final winner is Benedict Esquives. I hope I'm saying that right. He was watching on LinkedIn. He says, I'm a technical writer who's not really writing documentation so much anymore. Stumbled into making video job aids with Camtasia. Now looking into instructional design to expand my skill set. Sounds great.
That's so cool.
So congratulations,
I love
Benedict.
it.
Make sure you email the visual lounge at TechSmith.com. We'll gather your mailing information so we can send that out. As we wrap up talking with you, Tim, is any last parting pieces of wisdom, or feel free to any place people should be looking to find more of your stuff. I'm guessing timslade.com is the location to go to find you.
You can find me at timslade.com. I don't know, parting words of wisdom. I don't know, like I spent 9 months writing a book on e-learning. I don't have anything more to say about e-learning right now. So I'm just going to say, like, everyone take care of yourself, because 2020 has sucked and it's going to still suck for a while here. So, like, so many people have been thrown into positions and situations that we're just not accustomed to. So find a moment to, like, do some self-care. That's what I'll say.
No, well, thank you. And I get it. You've said everything you can say. Read the book. That's what Tim has to say about e-learning. I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, no worries.
Well, thanks again, Tim, for joining me. It's always a pleasure to have you on as a guest and to be able to chat with you. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more later about how everything in life is going, as we talked earlier this week. So thanks everybody. We're almost done, and we'll let Tim go here. But as we do have one final segment we like to do. So you've got great content from Tim Slade today, and he always brings lots of great information or great knowledge. But did you know TechSmith is doing lots to put out this great free content? And we have a segment we like to do here every week called What's New at TechSmith. So let's jump over to that right now. All right, everybody, we're going to take a look over at my screen here. Just give me a second to find the right place to switch to. And we're going to take a look at a couple things that are new at TechSmith this week. So the first one, and let's see if we can get rid of this. Here we go. There you can see it a little bit better. The first one is a blog post over at techsmith.com/blog. You can check that out. This is how to build the best user documentation. Now, if you're an instructional designer, e-learning, you might not be thinking about building user documentation, but it could be documentation on how to use a system. You might not be just making training videos or e-learning courses. You might actually need to document that process. So we've got tips and advice out there. You can go see lots of great information. Another thing that's on the blog this week is we launched, if you guys didn't know, the Visual Lounge podcast. And the podcast, like today we did with Tim, it goes into the podcast about in a week and a half from now. It takes a little time to process. And we also turned those into blog posts. So I did an episode a couple weeks ago, Better PowerPoints for Better Videos. You can watch that full edited version of that. You listen to the podcast, which you can find on your favorite podcasting platform, or you can just read about some of the advice and tips I give about making better presentations. So go check that out as well. And the last thing I'll point out that's new at TechSmith this week is a new video that dropped on YouTube, how to make product demo videos. Again, you might be thinking, I don't do that, but it's a great skill to learn. And my friend Andy Owen walks us through that process. And he also has down here a free video template. If you're using Camtasia 2020, you can get that template into Camtasia. So he's going to walk you through those things step by step. And Andy, if you don't know Andy,
it's easier to remove or trim down.
Fantastic. So check out his advice and information. So with that said, we want to thank everybody for sharing your stories. I literally I'm going to go back and read everyone's story because it's always so fascinating. And we appreciate you guys tuning in, listening in, Tim. If you got comments, questions, thoughts, you can email us at thevisuallounge@techsmith.com. If you were one of our winners, again, you need to email me because I need your information so we can send you Tim's book. And that was Sandra Blondit, Orchid Stream, and Benedict Esquives. You guys were all winners of Tim's book, and we'll get those out to you as soon as we get your information. But thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. And regardless of what you're doing, if you're making better videos, trying to become better instructional designers, get into the field, whatever you're doing, we encourage you to practice and work every day and work hard so you can level up each and every day. Thanks, everybody, and we will talk to you guys next week with another great guest. Cheers.